Good evening, folks. Welcome to another Friday session, or the first Friday session of Cat Space. One of many. I'm here with Buckets and my mentor and lifelong friend, Horsey. Good evening. How are you?
Hi, Cat. Hi, Bucket. Yeah, I'm good.
Good. Okay, so
I love the way we all smile at the start. I love the way we all smile at the start, don't we?
Absolutely.
Like the,
So
big cheesy grin. Yeah.
Tonight's topic is more of a serious topic, more of a serious conversation, which I think should be had. And let's get started. So the topic is on bullying and harassment. Bullying, the repeated unreasonable and unwelcome behavior towards any employee, individuals that creates a risk to health and safety, and harassment is unwanted behavior that humiliates or intimidates a person based on their characteristics such as gender, race, ethnicity. First question is, do men get the same treatment when a female bullies or harasses a male?
Ooh.
Let him answer this
Well,
one.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to hand this over to you, Horsey, because I'm a big man.
That doesn't happen as often as far as I know. But I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, are we talking harassment in general or sexual harassment or both?
I would say both. I mean, it could be in the workforce, or it could be just in general, a man and woman could be out somewhere and, sort of he comments on her clothes, or, he says something to her or she says something to him. That was what I meant. Is do men...
I mean, I would say not, because it's generally women seem to receive more attention and more when there is bullying or harassment going on. And certainly with cases of sexual harassment, it seems that many more of the complainants are women than men, which is probably because of the way men are, you see, because men are basically think with a certain part of their anatomy and they're just basically stupid. There you go. I'll put that on record.
I've been in situations because as a counsellor, and I've had to go through obviously work placements and stuff like that, where females are actually the dominant sex in those industries. And I can tell you that female sexual harassment actually does happen. Particularly if they're trying to get ahead and they want to, and they see men as a threat to them. And I've seen men that have literally done nothing wrong, okay, that have just been quashed or pushed aside and flattened effectively because they feel like they're fighting with a bag over their head with one hand cuffed behind them. Because they're in an industry where they're not meant to be sexist, or no one's meant to be sexist, but women have the upper hand because 9 out of 10 times they're seen as the victim instead of the perpetrator, and so they can take advantage of them very, very easily.
That's right. Taking advantage of that situation which normally happens. That's right. Yeah.
Speaking of the second question, which goes into what we're saying, is if a male comments on a female's clothing, and that is considered sexual harassment, is it still sexual harassment if a female comments on a male's clothing? I'm talking about if you're at work with someone and you go up to a female and go, "Oh, you look pretty. I love your clothes. You look hot." He would see it as sexual harassment. But if a female does it too, let's flip the cards. No offense to any woman out there, but let's flip the table and say, okay, if a female does it in a workplace area, is it considered bullying or is it considered harassment? Where she goes, "Oh, I like your suit. You look handsome. Is that perfume you're wearing?" So like that, just clothes, shoes. Would that become a form of sexual harassment because she's in the workforce? That makes it what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to be all serious. Would it be a cause of, I don't know what's the word?
Well, it would really depend on what was the intent. So if you're...
it depends on the context too.
So if there is a...
Depends on the context. It depends on the context. And if there's any pre-existing relationship between the people and all that, all those things. So yeah, it may well be. It may well be. I mean, sexual harassment is considered to be something that's unwelcome, an advance or overtures of sexual nature or referring to sexuality, which makes the other person uncomfortable because it's unwelcome. So yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at it in a professional way, as in not just in office. We both work, well, we both, are part of a, we're part of a radio station. You still are, I'm hoping to be. Say if it was at a radio station and someone, you saw a female coming to another male at the radio station and just started openly flirting, unwelcome, so you look cute, I love your clothes, this, that, sort of, would that be a cause of sexual harassment?
Again,
well, it could be. As I said, I mean, depending on the context, and if it was unwelcome, then yes, it is. It doesn't make any difference which gender is the perpetrator and which gender is the recipient. Really shouldn't make any difference. If it's unwelcome, then yes, it is, in my view.
the thing is,
What was that?
never mind.
Okay, go on.
Our long-haired assistant made a remark. I didn't catch it, unfortunately, but what was that, long-haired assistant?
I don't even know what you're talking about, so.
No, okay.
It was just off the book comment.
Okay, so what were you saying?
Long-haired assistant, you can leave that in the
Talking
comments.
about sexual
I didn't hear any of that.
Do you want to say what you were saying before?
Well, I mean, like, if like I was saying is, I kind of feel like there's kind of like a, it's harder for men to play the sex card as a form of discrimination. So unless they can actually prove that their sex has disadvantaged them somehow, they can't use the sex card. Whereas women can definitely use the sex card because too many people see women as the victim, which in my opinion is sexist in itself, because I think women should be treated as equals anyway, and they should be really on the skills that they have rather than the sex or gender that they have. But I think it should be equal, but at the same time, I don't think it actually.
Well, see, sexuality can certainly play a part, even if it isn't in the form of sexual harassment. I mean, I once worked in an industry which it was the book trade, and it was said that the book trade was run by women and gay men, and that was absolutely right. That's what I found and I discovered. And at one point, and it certainly wasn't anything that was actionable, but I did feel rather uncomfortable because my own views on homosexuality at one point in that workplace. As I say, nothing was really done, but things were said at times, and I was certainly made to feel that my views were uncommon in that workplace, and that I shouldn't actually express them, whereas others were certainly allowed to express their views. I didn't do anything about it, and it didn't really affect my work performance, but it was certainly connected with sexuality, and it could well, had the circumstances been different, have elevated into some sort of harassment or bullying. I mean, the beginnings of it were certainly there, so that can be a factor as well.
Next question. Should employees be given instant dismissal in the workplace for bullying or harassment?
The stock standard answer is yes. Every company that I know of has a policy that instant dismissal for bullying and harassment, particularly of a sexual nature, is what they do. Again, I'll say it depends on the context. I mean, what this gets back to is treating others as you want to be treated and treating others with respect. And I mean, when you look at what bullying is, it's actually not treating someone else with respect. It's treating someone as if they're of less value. than you are or than other people are. And whether it's to get your own way or whether it's just to prove a point, it's lording it over someone else. And if we, as I've said before, if we didn't do that, then it'd be a much better world. If we just treat others and give others grace all the time and treat others with respect and expect to be treated in the same way, it'll be great. So, I mean, yes, it should be. If it's something that makes someone else feel uncomfortable in the process of doing their work, which they shouldn't do, through no fault of theirs, for whatever motivation, then yes, it should. I would have no problem with, if I were a boss, saying, righto, look, you've made this person feel uncomfortable. Your actions aren't really, encouraging to them or anybody else, and are counterproductive to the workplace. So, I mean, there needs to be discussion about it first, I would think. But then if the perpetrator is unrepentant, then yeah, see you later. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. I think I agree with you. What you've said is that if someone has not just done this twice, once or twice, and has consistently been badgering, the opposite sex, and sort of becoming too much and invading personal space and causing issues for the person to become uncomfortable and even, find another job than leave. I think there should be warnings intact at work. I think there should be formal meetings and letters or emails regarding on what has been seen on camera and what has been heard and discussed. Warning should be in place, then an initial dismissal if it continues. What do you think?
I don't even know if they should give them a warning. I think perhaps they should give them a training pack or something like that, or make them sign a form of agreement to say you will not sexually assault or harass any staff members. I think someone should do that, or even have sort of like an RSA style course, telling them directly, what you can and can't do, like the do's and don'ts. But if they like, and that would be, I suppose, your warning or your training simulation as what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And if they break that, then bang, instant dismissal. I'm happy with instant dismissal because it doesn't matter if you're female or male. You're there to work, and work will never be productive if there is a form of harassment or bullying in the workplace. It just stops things from getting done. It's really annoying.
See, I do think that there should be a warning of some sort, because there are cases where certain people have a particular personality. You talk about invading personal space. I worked with people in the past a few times who just stand very close to you when they're talking to you. They don't even realize they're doing it because it's part of their culture. It's just the way they are. I had a boss a few years ago who, when he joined the company, he started to do that, and everybody commented on it. And I think he was made aware of it after a while, and that behaviour stopped. But see, he didn't even realise it was a problem until obviously he was informed, took steps to correct it, because he realised it was annoying other people. And even, I mean, it wasn't bullying by any means, but yeah, so I mean, certainly there should be a period of grace, because the perpetrator may not even realise there's a problem in some cases, and there are certainly cases where they do. But yeah, so just to be made aware of what's going on and the fact that your behaviour is viewed as bullying or harassment, and they might say, "Oh, look, I didn't even realise." Okay, and then the problem just goes away, which happens in many cases, which is good.
I've been in situations where basically I've worked in a kitchen, right? Because I used to be a chef, and they used to give us free jugs of water or Coke or whatever you want, just to keep you going, because there's a lot of perspiration when you're a chef. And I remember people used to put Tabasco sauce in my water. And I drank that because I drank it from the jug itself. And I just kind of brushed it off and just went, all right, fine, I'm just going to finish it anyway. I don't care. But technically, that's workplace bullying, and it's non-productive. And given if too many of those incidents happen, it really does slow the business, and it causes all sorts of problems. I mean, think about how many occupational health and safety problems happen in a kitchen. I mean, that could have quite easily caused all sorts of problems.
Well, obviously, in a case like that, I mean, that's just malicious, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
There's no two ways about that.
Next question. Should workplaces enforce rules and regulations by including the do's and don'ts as part of a training package before starting a job? And my answer to that is yes. I think anyone who gets a job or will get a job has to have rules and regulations, and has the do's and don'ts. You can't do this, you can't do that, can't say this, can't say that, don't behave like this, you can behave like this. I think it's important to have a training package where they sign on the dotted line to say, I've read the rules and regulations, I know my rights, I know the do's and don'ts, and I'm willing to go for the training package. What do you think?
Yeah, I like I said before, I mean, if you have a training package, right, and you tell them this is exactly what you need to do, okay, this is, and have that as part of the, because you know how some works, they have like a training thing about on the job skills. I certainly
I
certainly did when I was working for Olympic Stadium. And you know, there was like a 1-day training program. Well, if they incorporated what you shouldn't do, and that includes sexual harassment and normal harassment and bullying, as part of the trainings, as a compulsory training thing, and that was mandatory by law, then you could go back to that and say, you've done A, B, C, D, and E, or you've done A, and this goes against training, you're sacked. And that way, if you don't know the laws, because sometimes people do things like they'll comment on a woman's clothing, but not actually realize that that actually is sexual harassment. So if you basically strongly teach that this is not what you're meant to do in the workplace, then there is no excuse for why you said what you said.
I agree. Here, Posey.
I certainly think that, you know, laying it all out beforehand, I mean, most employers will do that now. I mean, I've been in several jobs where at the beginning there is a great big manual that you've got to read at least, and sign off on that you understand everything in it, and that you will abide by certain conditions, and you will do these things and you won't do other things. And the consequences, if you do, are spelled out clearly. So being clear is good. But I mean, most companies now, even smaller outfits, at least have, if they don't have a human resources manager or human resources department, they'll at least have access for employees confidentially to what's called employee assistance program, which is a third party company where you can contact a representative and you can actually discuss things that are happening in your workplace without necessarily letting your employer know. And you can be referred to a counsellor if necessary, all confidentially. And I think that's a very good thing. People sort of, you know, if people are made redundant and lose their job, they support them in finding new work and all that sort of stuff. So they perform many functions. But I think those things are in place at most workplaces, except for probably very small businesses that don't have the resources to pay for that. But still, there's actually there is legal redress available anyway, if you land up in a situation that's where you feel uncomfortable, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's important to tell your boss or the person you're working for in private, not just by email or a memo, because that memo could be seen by the whole office or studio, wherever you're at, and just sit down with them and say, listen, I feel violated, and I feel like this person has not just invaded my personal space, but has flirted with me on multiple occasions, and I've shown no interest, and I've said I'm not interested, and they've persisted. I don't want to get them in trouble, but could you please politely have a word with them? Because if this persists, I may see myself leaving the company to go somewhere else.
And the problem arises though when the perpetrator or the person making the employee feel uncomfortable is the boss.
Yes.
And so there's kind of nowhere to go, and most people end up just leaving. And there's no, there's no easy answer to that, particularly in smaller organisations or family businesses. I'm not just talking about sexual harassment necessarily, but bullying, even if it's a sort of silent type of bullying, which isn't overtly violent or anything you might say, but just is where someone feels as if they're kind of frozen out, and there's no one they can approach because everybody who they can approach is kind of part of the problem. And I don't see, as I say, most people end up just leaving the employment and getting other employment to get out of the situation. I don't see any alternative to that, unless, as I say, you want to go down the legal path, which can be costly and cause further stress. And we say, oh, is that really worth it? And many times people say, oh, no, it's not worth it. I don't want the extra stress. I'd rather just leave. Yeah,
Exactly.
Which is sad, but that's the reality. And in life, that's going to happen. I mean, you can't actually perfectly sort out every situation in this life, can you?
Great.
Sometimes you can, and other times you can't. Sometimes it's just not possible. It just doesn't work. And so you've got to say, righto, walk away and move on.
Well, I had a friend of mine who basically decided to get the ombudsman in his work because he felt that one of the chefs that was working there was harassing him. And basically he told the boss about it, and the boss didn't care and just said, this isn't my problem, right? And so he ended up getting the ombudsman. And what ended up happening was the ombudsman came in and shut down the whole company. And he was without a job because the company shut down. He was without work.
You cut off your nose to spite your face. That's right. And do you make the decision to do that? And see, one other thing, which I mean, maybe these days is not so common, is perhaps to be part of a union. Now, unions are good and bad, and many of them emerge these days, and they kind of have less power than they used to. But in certain industries, it may well be good to be part of the union in case something like this occurs, just so you can have their support.
I agree. Next question. A lot of Australian ads have the term violence against women. Australia says no. But should we really be saying domestic violence against anyone? Australia says no.
It's called family violence nowadays. There's a new term they're using, family violence, and so yeah, that's right. It's not just against women.
Because I think a lot of the time we have this perception in our society that it's just the women that are the victims, and men can't be victims because they're men. And that can be further from the truth, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, I'm a girl and I'm a female. No offense to any girl or woman out there, but I think that men do get treated very badly. Men go through a lot. Men are abused.
We're not just talking about physical violence here.
No.
Where there can be, other forms of, for want of a better word, emotional abuse that goes on in relationships, and which is no hands are ever lifted, but it's still just as bad in a way.
That's the words I was going to use. It's not just physical. There's mental, there's emotional, there's verbal, there's psychological abuse, and as much as women do go through it all, I think men. There are men out there that stay silent because they're also afraid, and because they're also a target, and they're targeted because, many people say, oh, it's against women, blah, blah, blah. But don't forget, there are my husband's incredible. You're incredible. There are many men out there who are simply, wonderful men, family men, who go through a lot and who are very silent on a daily basis. one day.
And because of the perception that if they speak up and say there's something wrong here, then people say, oh, hang on, no, that's not right, because of the historic perception that, if you're a man,
Yeah,
you're strong and you're not weak, you don't show any weakness.
yeah.
Which not to put too fine a point on it, is BS. Really, yeah.
You want to say something?
No, I'd pretty much agree with that. I agree with it. I don't have anything to say about that.
All right, last question. What kind of things can we implement to lower levels of bullying and harassment everywhere we go?
Let's see.
I think what we need to implement is every workforce, even if they sign on the dotted line, they should have it at their stations, at the computers, where the boss will, blue tack it or will staple it or put it in their folder. You must read this every day. You must sign it when you come to work and you sign in. You must say that you've read this and you understand the rules and the regulations. You must understand that you cannot bother anyone. You have to be respectful and respectable. I think there should be an implement of maybe more work board meetings or work meetings where they can have days or nights where they can stop what they're doing at work and have like a public speaker come and do like what's that word called, seminars. That's it, where they can do seminars and they can go undergo training about that.
And I certainly think that's important. And being aware what sorts of behaviours are problematic and that we don't want that sort of behaviour in this workplace. But I also think in terms of choosing employees, when people are hired, these days it's customary not to have a full resume of everything you've ever done because it goes for 10 pages and people don't bother to read it anyway. Just the things that are relevant to that particular job that you're applying for. Having said that, most people, when they present themselves in applying for work, present their best side. So I think that as far as an employer is concerned or interviewer is concerned, to actually ask questions about the other aspects of their life, finding out, for example, whether they have a family and what their hobbies are and all sorts of other things that they're involved in, what they like to, and getting them to talk about the things they like to talk about. Will actually give the interviewer a sense of what sort of person they're dealing with there. And some clues might pop up as to say, well, okay, this person may well be the type of person that will cause a problem or may have in the past been involved in bullying. And so why did you leave that particular job? Why did you move from here to here? That sort of, just asking not so much probing questions, but questions which encourage the person to talk about themselves. And so you'll pick up clues from that. And if it appears that that person might not be right for the workplace or right for, their behaviour might be a bit questionable, then okay, don't hire them, because there'll be someone else coming along for another interview in a few minutes and we'll talk to them.
What do you think? You've been silent.
Like if it was me, and I know this is a bit creative, but if it was me, I would have, how you have the secret boss, remember that show, Secret Boss?
Undercover Boss.
Undercover Boss. And if it was me, I wouldn't have an undercover boss. If it was me, I'd basically have an undercover spy ring, basically watching people in the shadows and then reporting back to the day.
I think that, with all
that's what I would be doing.
With all seriousness, jokes aside, with all seriousness, I think that happens now more often than so, because I'm sure when the boss isn't at work, they nominate or delegate one person as their 2IC. And when they're not in the building, they get that 2IC to write down, jot notes on anything, jot down notes on anything that's happened, words that have been said, to do like investigations, check people's work and whatnot. And I think they every job has a 2IC. I worked in retail and there was always a shift manager or a 2IC, and they would watch everything anyone says or does, and they watch the cameras and they hear things. And I think it's important to have someone like a second in charge or a third and second in charge to make sure that if they're away, if they're not there, that it's important.
Yeah, I do think though we need to steer. I mean, many areas of society, not just in employment.
Mm.
I mean, okay, it's fair enough to say, right, these behaviours will not be tolerated, zero tolerance, and you'll be sacked on the spot if you engage in them. That's fair enough, and that's quite standard, because those behaviours that are described thus are actually not very nice behaviours. But I do think we need to steer away from things that are purely punitive. And I mean, I've spoken before about the culture of fear that exists in our society in some areas. If you do the wrong thing, we'll punish you, and we'll punish you hard. So you better not be caught. That's the word that comes down from on high. Whereas I prefer to say, we value you as an employee or as a participant, or as we think you are of value. We think you have a great contribution to make. We want to help you make that contribution in the best way you can, and make sure you're making that contribution in the best area, and that things are right. You know, as I said before, companies having the right people in the right structure, and then it works. Because purely punitive measures, in my experience, get people's back up, and they don't work in the end. They're ineffective a lot of the time. So there's got to be primarily encouragement there. Yes, a reminder that if certain behaviours are exhibited, then that's not to be tolerated. And there are good reasons why. And these are the good reasons why, because we want to encourage everybody else just as we want to encourage you. Not only to say this is what's going to happen to you if you exhibit that behaviour, but also to say this is the reason why we need to do that, because of the encouragement we want to bring to the workplace or to the environment. That would be my preferred way of going about it. What do you reckon?
What do you reckon?
Well, I think kind of changing the work culture would be a massive step, to be perfectly honest.
It is in many companies. It's very hard to change an established culture. It really is. I've experienced that.
But I think also having a little bit of fear isn't such a bad thing either.
Oh, no. A little bit, yes. Accompanied by encouragement.
But yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Well, I guess that's all we have for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Ozzy. We'll look forward to seeing you next week with another great topic. Before you go,
that was an encouraging discussion. See ya.
Certainly
don't forget to subscribe. Please ring that bell so you can get all of our podcasts. Tell your friends, and if you have any topics, please let us know. We'd be happy to talk about.
Tell all your work stuff.
Yeah, tell your work stuff as well. We'd be happy to hear from that. Otherwise, good night.
Right.
Bye.